I think that's why I've never taken LSD. I experimented. We've talked about this many, many times, but I experimented with mushrooms and a little bit with salvia, and those experiences taught me that there is a different thing. There's different ways of thinking, and I've come across people who think differently in very sort of profound ways, and I don't think I've ever needed to get that sort of what you sort of that sort of catch-all phrase that you used, fucked up. You know, I've never really felt as though I needed that. I felt as though with marijuana it was enough to make music sound great and to give me about a 10-minute buzz of warmth. That sort of like, oh, that feels really nice, sort of little bit of warmth that comes, which is very similar to the opiates. You know, there's that kind of warmth that creeps across your body, all of which is horribly dangerous. But I think that the only thing I can say about it is that well, it's what Bill Hicks said, isn't it? It's a ride. You're in for the ride, and you get to make some of the rules, and some are made for you. But the idea of it's interesting that you would talk about the weather responding to your certainty, you know, your wish to have the storm and your wish for it to be clear, or your certainty that it would be clear. That kind of thinking is something that has disappeared from the world. Aside from you saying it right now, I haven't heard about that since the 80s, long before the internet. But when I was a boy growing up, I've got a book through in the library there called Strange Powers by a guy called Colin Wilson, and that's what he talks about. He talks about spending a day with a guy who could walk into a shop and take whatever he wanted, and walk out of the shop and walk across the street without waiting for the traffic to stop, and everything would just move around him because he was completely certain of everything that would happen. And that Colin spent the day with him and witnessed all of this happening. And there was a movement of would it be spiritualism or would it be philosophy or what it was? But the idea that you could just think reality. You could just think, if you were certain about it, it would happen. You know, you can't break the laws of physics, but you can have an effect in the world that is not. It's not where you're subject to the world, but the world is subject to you to some degree. Now, I think that's going to be different for everybody, and you could rationalise it by saying, well, as far as the body's concerned, it's positive thinking. Positive thinking makes a difference to your body. I think it does. I think people who are incredibly negative. I think there's been some research to show that people who are very negative and very stressed have higher cancer incidences, and that people that are relaxed and chill, naturally speaking, without being medicated, that they get fewer cancers. Whether that's real or not, I don't know. Again, do your own fact checking. But certainly my experience with, as we were talking about earlier there, with prayer or with just reaching out to the universe, is that there is a mechanism there that responds. I definitely think that. Now, I thought for a while that it could be that each of us lives in our own universe, and that the universe we get is different from everybody else's universe. And although we're all living in our own little universes, the way that they join up is not the way that we think they're joining up. That your universe and my universe overlap, but they don't overlap in the way that where you would have consequence and effect. It's not like that. It's something else that's happening. So our universes do overlap, but they're not overlapping insofar as if you wish for good weather and I wish for bad weather, what happens then? It's like if everybody wants to win the lottery, who wins the lottery? Well, there's only one person out of that million people who can win the lottery, or it's two people, or however it works out. But maybe where those wishes or prayers or thoughts do not overlap, maybe the universe can accommodate. So if the universe knew that Chris really had always wanted the sky to be clear that day, the universe creates a little pocket of clear sky because nobody else is bothered. Nobody else has wished as hard as Chris has wished for his whole bloody life, you know. And it might be like that. There's one experience which I've alluded to, which we haven't talked about because it would take too long. We need to do a special about the day that I had, and I mean, it's not an extraordinary day. There's nothing. I mean, your tale of going to Boston is far more entertaining and far more of a story than mine would be. But for me, it was special. It was an amazing day, and it just was the universe just going, there, I told you. You know, you wanted that thing, you got that thing, but you also got, as we'd say in Scotland, you got telt, you got told, you got instructed, you were shown a little bit, the veil was lifted slightly for you. Make the most of that, you know. And it's again, like, because I'm slow with these things, it took years for me to figure that out. Oh, that was the universe showing me that it does actually respond. It can respond, you know. So yeah. So I think in terms of health, that's a good thing to do. It doesn't do any harm, you know. Just ask, demand.
And you're right. I'm gonna try to be more mindful of that too, because I think part of it is it's lost. I think you're right. There's not a lot of people walking around thinking that way anymore. People are clouded with
no, everything's super rational, super logical, but often the logic is flawed. I'm a big fan of logical thinking, and the idea that, you know, logical fallacy is a trap that many people fall into. There's a great list somewhere online, I think it's a Wikipedia list of logical fallacies, and it goes through them all, and they all have names. And people who learn philosophy learn about all the logical fallacies, and it's fantastic because you can then quote them. You know, you can say that's the logical fallacy of false equivalence, that's the logical fallacy of appeal to authority, and they've all got names, and you see it all over the place all the time. You know, and for people who think like we do, who try to think rationally and you know, in a logical sequence, not only does it give you the idea that you can do that, but it also shows your own failings. It shows where you're using these logical fallacies to prop yourself up, and if you can get rid of them, you get to a better understanding, you know. So many years ago I came up with this idea, which I don't know if it's a real idea that's out there in the world, but the idea of post-rationalism, that to be truly rational, you have to admit the irrational, because it's always part of what's going on. There's always something you don't know, which makes you look irrational. Like if you believe in something without any evidence, that's not rational. No, but it is post-rational. It's rational to believe in irrational things because they make sense. They make sense to you and to your worldview. It's perfectly acceptable and normal to be irrational about some things, like me and chickens. There's no reason why I would hate chickens, but I do. I fucking hate chickens. And I hold on to that as that's mine. You can't take that away from me. If I don't want to like chickens, I don't have to fucking like chickens. You know, they're little bastardy dinosaurs. I don't like them. I know why I don't like them, because I had a childhood experience with them. It's so silly, but I just like the fact that I can hold on to that, you know. But there's all kinds of irrational things that do make sense to individuals, and it's okay. That's okay to be rational, but also be post-rational, to accept that there's shit you don't know, and that might look irrational now, but might actually resolve itself into being perfectly rational later, you know?
Yeah. What? Yes, that's very true. I agree with that. And it's the brain's a crazy thing, you know, and it's no pun intended, but it's crazy in the sense that a lot of us, I think we're the same, and we think that, you know, when you meet someone and you're talking to them, you're going like, hey, I'm just like you. But if you live a day in their head, you realize that the zoo in their head is a completely different zoo than you're living with, you know, and it's informed by so many different experiences and so many different things that solidify, and, you know, and some things that disappear, and things get forgotten, things get remembered, you know, and we're all in this weird thing, you know, and I've noticed that the psychedelics are good for that. I've noticed, because I'll be hanging out with a couple of friends, we're all on psychedelics, and someone will say something that's so far away from my train of thought, and I'm going like I have a buddy he grew up in a religious household, like super Christian, and he's rejected everything about like Christianity. He spent his whole life trying to rationalize atheism, right? But like every time he trips out, he comes up with this idea for a new religion every time.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, why does it have to go there? He's just like, well, isn't that where it's supposed to happen? I'm like, I never think about making religions. Never have I ever thought about making a religion. It's never, you know, I'm perfectly okay with the religions that are here, and I'm perfectly okay with not being part of them or being a part of whatever I want. Like, I'm okay with all the spiritualism. I think it goes so far deep into human history. I don't think I'm capable of creating a religion. It's kind of solipsistic of you to think you can just create a religion in your head, you know. But at the same time, he spent his whole life struggling with how much effect religion has on him, right? So in his head, he's probably seeing crosses and stars of David everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Like he can't avoid it, you know. Whereas I'm seeing Fibonacci sequences and Mandelbrot's, you know, because I'm more into geometry and you know, and science than I am into the faith. Even though my faith grows stronger as I get older, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm accepting it because I'm realizing it's part of the way I age and part of the way I've cope with things that are hard to cope with, like, you know, like losing people you love and dealing with inevitable death and realizing that the you know, and Jordan Peterson has been a big proponent of me understanding like a rational view of religion, you know. So it's been I'm enjoying that ride, you know. And if for some reason I change my mind, I'll change my mind. Like, I'm the older I get. Well, I shouldn't say the older I get. Something I've always hung on to, and I didn't realize how important it was and I realize how important it is the older I get, is allowing yourself to change your mind, because that's having your mind changed from internal forces or external forces is a very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people stagnate on the, like, hanging on to things, like, you know, and like even like your friend there with the check, you know, like you were afraid to even say, like, pray to God because you didn't want him to lose the message because you said God.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you know, and to you, God and the universe are probably kind of the same thing. Like to me, I don't believe in the white bearded guy in the clouds. I think that's absurd, you know. But I believe, like we mentioned earlier today, that the sun is our God. You know, like I don't doubt that for 1 second. That, like, to me, the sun is our God.
Yeah.
You know, now there might be something to suggest that we are aliens on this planet, which would just mean some other sun was our God then. But I think it all started with light and radiation. Like, I don't think there's any evidence to suggest this universe created life by any other way. I think it all involves stars, and stars mutating DNA of existing, you know, mitochondria or whatever else, however life manifested. I don't think it's outside the universe it created. And I think it's all based on radiation. The radiation is produced by these gas giants, right? But you know, so am I praying to the sun when I pray for a good eye? Not really, you know, but you know.
In fact, looking towards the sun might cause the problem to be even worse, eh?
Exactly, right?
Heal my eye. No, I'll just burn it out, and then you won't have to worry about it anymore.